Wind tore across the Montana ridge hard enough to turn falling snow into needles. Clarissa Dempsey had stopped feeling her feet hours ago. Her boots were too large, stuffed with old newspaper that had gone wet and useless. Ice clung to her lashes, every breath scraped her lungs, and every step sent another cramp through her left thigh. She had been walking for 3 days since the stolen mare lost a shoe near the river crossing. 3 days since she had escaped Oakhaven. 3 days since she had smashed Jallen Boon across the mouth, taken his purse of silver, climbed through the back window of his saloon, and run before the man who believed he owned the entire town could decide how to punish her. Boon had wanted to marry her, not because he loved her, because Clarissa had refused him. For a man like Jallen Boon, refusal was an insult that had to be conquered. Clarissa pressed one hand against a ponderosa pine and forced herself upright. Keep moving. If she sat down, she would die. The mountain did not care that Boon had bruised her ribs. Winter did not care that she had slept in barns and abandoned sheds for weeks before finally making her escape. Snow did not care whether a woman deserved another chance. Through the white haze, a dark square appeared. A cabin. Smoke streamed sideways from a stone chimney. Clarissa felt no relief. Relief required trust, and she had exhausted hers years ago. But a cabin meant fire. Fire meant another hour alive. She staggered across the clearing, reached the porch, and collapsed against the door. Her fist struck the wood twice before the latch lifted. A man filled the doorway. He was enormous, broad through the shoulders, heavily bearded, dressed in rough mountain clothes, an iron poker in one hand and a split log in the other. Pale gray eyes moved over Clarissa without softness or surprise. Then they shifted beyond her, searching the storm for whoever might have followed. "We're closed," he said. Clarissa almost laughed. Instead, she whispered, "Please, fire." The man stared another second. Then he dropped the log, caught her by the thick wool of her stolen coat, and hauled her inside. The door slammed shut. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the heat. Clarissa crumpled to the floor. "Don't crawl against the stove," the man ordered. "You'll damage the skin before you feel it." She tried to untie her frozen boots. Her fingers refused to work. He muttered something under his breath, crouched, and pushed her hands aside. His calloused fingers worked quickly through the frozen laces. He stripped off the boots and wet socks and inspected her toes. Pale, but alive. That sounds promising. Another hour out there and I'd be cutting them off. Clarissa looked up. There was no teasing in his expression. "Thank you. I didn't invite you." He rose. "I'll give you food, a blanket and the floor. When the storm clears, you leave." Clarissa pulled the blanket around herself. She had survived Jallen Boon. She could survive one unpleasant mountain man. His name, she soon learned, was Wyatt Mercer. He lived alone above the timberline and had done so for 5 years. He trapped, hunted, cured hides, repaired his own tools, and spoke only when silence would no longer do the job. By nightfall, Clarissa understood something else about him. He was not careless. The cabin was harsh, but immaculate. Firewood was stacked evenly. Rifles were cleaned. Traps hung in orderly rows. Every tool had a place. Every pelt had been properly treated. A violent-looking man might have built the place, but a disciplined man maintained it. Wyatt sat at the table under a kerosene lamp, cleaning a Winchester, while Clarissa fought a strip of salted elk meat. "Who is he?" he asked. She looked up. "Who says there's a he? Women don't cross a mountain in a blizzard for recreation." His eyes finally met hers. "You're either running from the law or from a man. You don't look like a bank robber." "Jallen Boon." Wyatt's hand stopped on the rifle barrel. "I know the name. He runs Oakhaven. He terrorizes Oakhaven. He decided I would marry him. And you disagreed. With his face, then with his money." Something almost amused flickered in Wyatt's eyes. "You stole from him. I recovered travel expenses. He'll send men." "Yes." Wyatt returned to the rifle. "Not tonight." The temperature fell after dark. Even with the stove burning, cold seeped through the floorboards and the unchinked places between the logs. Wyatt ate, added wood to the fire, removed his shirt, and climbed beneath the heavy bear and wolf pelts covering the only bed. Clarissa had expected another kind of conversation. Instead, he turned his back. "Keep the stove alive," he said. That was all. An hour later, Clarissa was shaking so badly that her teeth hurt. She moved closer to the stove. The side facing the iron burned while the rest of her froze. Her gaze drifted toward the bed. Finally, desperation defeated pride. "Mr. Mercer." "Nothing." "Wyatt." "I hear you. I'm freezing." Still, he did not move. "I'll freeze on this floor." Wyatt rolled onto one elbow. In the weak firelight, his expression became unreadable. Clarissa recognized what he saw in her: expectation. She knew the rules men usually imposed. Food had a price. Shelter had a price. Protection had the highest price of all. "I don't share my bed," Wyatt said. Clarissa's jaw hardened. "I'm not offering anything." "I know. I'm not a whore. I didn't call you one." "Then give me one corner of those furs and forget I exist." Wyatt sat up. "I live alone because I chose it. No wife, no household, no obligations beyond myself. I'm asking not to die." He stood. The mattress creaked as his weight left it. Wyatt crossed the cabin and stopped before her. He was close enough that his warmth reached her before his hands did. When he placed them on her shoulders, Clarissa stiffened. He noticed. His grip immediately loosened. "If you sleep in my bed," he said, voice low, "you wake up as my wife." Clarissa stared at him. "That is the strangest proposal I have ever heard." "It isn't much of a proposal." "No. I won't take a woman into my bed tonight and throw her down the mountain tomorrow like she meant nothing." She studied his face. "And if I say no, you keep the blanket. I move the stove closer if I can do it without burning the cabin down. Nothing else changes." That mattered. Clarissa let the silence stretch. "What does wife mean to you?" "Kin. Equal work. Shared food. Shared danger. This house becomes yours too." "And obedience?" "No." "Ownership?" Wyatt's jaw shifted. "I protect what belongs under my roof. I am not a rifle or a wolf pelt." His gaze held hers. "No. If I stay, it will be because I choose to stay." "Yes. And if you ever forget that, I leave." Wyatt nodded once. Clarissa looked toward the frozen floor, then toward the bed. All her life safety had been temporary. A rented room, a locked door, a few dollars hidden in a stocking, a knife beneath a pillow. Wyatt was offering something frighteningly permanent in the bluntest language imaginable. Not romance, not tenderness. A place. "All right," she whispered. His eyes narrowed slightly. "All right what?" "I choose the bed." He leaned toward her, then stopped. For the first time since she had met him, he hesitated. Clarissa understood the question he did not know how to ask. She curled cold fingers into the front of his shirt and pulled him the final inch. Wyatt kissed her hard. There was nothing polished in it. His lips were chapped, his beard rough, his whole body carrying the heat of the cabin fire. The kiss was fierce enough to steal her breath, yet the moment Clarissa loosened her grip, he stopped. Neither spoke. Wyatt returned to the bed and lifted the furs. "Get in." Clarissa crawled beneath them, fully clothed. Wyatt lay beside her without touching her again. His body formed a wall of heat between her and the frozen room. For the first time in months, Clarissa slept without a knife in her hand. Morning came gray and quiet. She woke alone and panicked before the scent of bacon reached her. Wyatt stood at the stove. "You snore," he said. "I do not. Wolves probably heard you." Clarissa sat up, remembering the bargain. The word wife settled uneasily into her chest. Over breakfast, she finally asked, "Are we going to discuss what happened?" "Already did." "That was not a discussion. That was a mountain issuing terms. You accepted them." Clarissa almost smiled despite herself. "You don't even know whether I can cook." "I can cook." What exactly do you need a wife for, then? Wyatt pointed his fork at her. Can you shoot? Yes. Can you mend leather? Yes. Clean traps. If someone shows me. Keep a fire alive? I'm sitting here, aren't I? Then you work beside me. His expression changed. In return, no one puts hands on you again. Clarissa went still. Not Boon, not one of his hired dogs, not anybody. Why? Wyatt seemed genuinely confused by the question. Because you're here. That is not an answer. It's the only one I have. He pushed away from the table and lifted his rifle. I'm checking the ridge. Clarissa watched him leave. Then she washed their plates. Their plates. The thought frightened her more than the gun beside the door. Outside, Wyatt found the first sign before noon. A horseshoe print sheltered beneath a spruce. Beside it, a man's boot. The marks were older than the fresh snow. Someone had reached the ridge before the worst of the storm and waited it out below the cabin. Wyatt returned without running. Running left signs. Running told an enemy he had frightened you. Inside, Clarissa saw his face and immediately moved away from the window. Boon? His men. Wyatt opened a chest and removed ammunition, a bandolier, and a double-barreled shotgun. He loaded 2 shells and handed it to her. Both hammers back. Stock tight against your shoulder. It kicks. How many? 1 track. Probably more men. Clarissa looked at the door. If they get inside, they won't. If they do, you don't die because of me. Wyatt turned. This is not because of you. They came for me. They came onto my land with rifles. That became my business. Wyatt. His gray eyes hardened. We made a bargain. You stayed. I stayed. That means something. A rifle cracked outside. Wood exploded above the door. Clarissa dropped. Wyatt did not. 2 more shots tore into the cabin, one striking a log, the other shattering the upper pane of the window. Freezing air rushed through. Wyatt found a firing slit between the logs, leveled his Winchester, and waited. He fired twice. A cry came from the trees. Hit one! The next hour stretched into a cold, brutal siege. Clarissa kept the shotgun trained toward the door while Wyatt moved between firing positions. At last, a voice called from the trees. Mountain Man, send the girl out. Boon wants his property. Clarissa felt her stomach knot. Wyatt's face changed. He stepped close enough to the wall for his voice to carry through the clearing. My name is Wyatt Mercer. There is no property in this house. Silence. Then the man outside laughed. Boon says otherwise. Then Boon can climb this mountain and hear it himself. Clarissa is my wife. She stays because she chooses to stay. Clarissa looked at him. Wyatt did not look back. He was watching the tree line. The distinction mattered more than he probably understood. Movement flickered near the woodshed. They're flanking. Wyatt lifted the wooden bar from the door. Clarissa grabbed his sleeve. You'll be exposed. For a few seconds. That is enough to die. Yes. His calm terrified her. If I don't go, they reach the chimney and burn us out. He opened the door. Gunfire erupted. Wyatt dropped to one knee on the porch and fired toward the woodshed. A man stumbled and collapsed into the snow. A second shot struck the stove behind Clarissa, spraying sparks. Cover! Wyatt shouted. She moved to the doorway. Another man charged from the trees with a revolver raised. Wyatt turned. His Winchester jammed. Clarissa saw everything at once. The frozen casing trapped in the action. The gunman running through thigh-deep snow. Wyatt fighting the lever. The revolver lifting toward his back. She did not think about Jallen Boon. She did not think about morality. She thought about the man who had given her a choice when she expected a price. Clarissa raised the shotgun. The stock pressed into her shoulder. She fired. The recoil threw her backward. Pain exploded down her arm. The charging man dropped into the snow. For several seconds, Clarissa could hear nothing but ringing. Then Wyatt was inside. He barred the door and crouched beside her. His hand closed carefully under her chin. You didn't run. Where would I go? His thumb wiped soot from her cheek. You saved my life. Clarissa looked toward the doorway. Her stomach twisted when she thought of the body outside. I killed him. Yes. Her eyes returned to Wyatt. He was going to kill you. Yes. I didn't do it because I belong to you. Something in Wyatt's expression shifted. I know. I did it because you belong with me. For once, the mountain man had no answer. Clarissa touched his face with her uninjured hand. Wyatt leaned in slowly enough for her to turn away. She did not. The kiss was different from the night before. No bargain. No desperation. Only shock, relief, and the sudden knowledge that they had chosen each other under fire. When they separated, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. Need to fix that window. Clarissa laughed once, almost hysterically. Of course we do. The practical problem saved them from the horror. Wyatt nailed elk hide across the broken pane, while Clarissa sat near the stove clutching her injured shoulder. When the hammering made her flinch, he stopped. He examined the bruise. Collarbone's intact. It doesn't feel intact. The shotgun punished you. I noticed. He warmed a pine and arnica salve between his fingers. This will hurt. Everything today hurts. This time he waited. Clarissa nodded. Only then did he touch her. That small pause affected her more deeply than she expected. She had spent too long around men who interpreted silence as permission and fear as weakness. Wyatt was rough in speech, rough in appearance, and capable of frightening violence, but he was learning where his authority ended. At her skin. At her choice. At the boundaries of another human being. When the salve began to numb the pain, Clarissa said, Jallen will know. Yes. When these men don't return, he will know exactly where I am. Good. She looked up sharply. Wyatt cleaned his hands on a rag. The mountain passes will close again. Boon won't bring a large force through winter. He'll come in spring. Yes. So we have until spring. Wyatt reached for the shotgun. We have until spring. Winter became their truce. Snow climbed past the windows and buried the cabin beneath months of white silence. Outside, the mountain erased the marks of violence. Inside, survival demanded too much attention for either of them to spend every hour fearing Jallen Boon. Clarissa healed. She learned the stove, the traps, the storage cache, the habits of animals, the dangerous sounds ice made before breaking. Her palms hardened, her shoulders strengthened. She became skilled at stretching hides and repairing harness leather. Wyatt never praised her extravagantly. He simply stopped checking her work. That meant more. When he trusted her with a task, it became hers. And slowly, parts of the cabin became hers too. She moved jars because the old arrangement made no sense. Wyatt moved them back. She moved them again. He stared at the shelf for almost a minute. Then he left them where she wanted. She stitched a cloth curtain over a storage alcove. You decorating? He asked suspiciously. I am preventing dust. The dust never bothered me. The dust never had a vote. Wyatt grunted. The curtain remained. Some evenings they barely spoke. Clarissa mended clothing while Wyatt molded bullets or repaired traps. Other nights he returned from the trapline exhausted and found coffee waiting. When Clarissa woke from dreams of Oakhaven, she learned Wyatt never demanded explanations. He simply moved closer. He did not hold her unless she reached for him. Eventually, she always did. One evening in late February, water began dripping from the eaves. Plink, plink, plink. Clarissa stopped sewing. The thaw. Wyatt nodded. How long? 2 weeks, 3 if nights stay hard. Jallen Boon immediately returned to the room without physically being there. Clarissa watched Wyatt pour lead into a bullet mold. You're making more ammunition. I'm making enough. For what? To make Boon regret coming uphill. Clarissa set aside Wyatt's coat. Months ago, those words would have terrified her. Now she only asked, "How do we make sure both of us survive?" Wyatt looked at her. Not "how do you protect me?" How do we survive? That was the difference winter had built between them. He crossed the cabin and took the needle from her fingers. "You should be afraid. I was afraid for a year. Boon is still dangerous. So am I." A small smile appeared beneath Wyatt's beard. Clarissa blinked. "I believe that may be the first time I've seen you smile. You imagined it. I shot a man. My eyesight still works." The smile almost returned. Wyatt brushed one knuckle along her jaw. "You are a hard woman, Clarissa Mercer." The new surname still affected her. Not because he had imposed it, because somewhere during those long winter nights, she had stopped hearing it as a bargain. She covered his hand with hers. "I had to become hard. I know. And I don't want to stay hard everywhere." Wyatt's expression softened. For a man so comfortable with rifles, blood, and freezing wilderness, tenderness frightened him. Clarissa saw it. She stepped closer. "You can kiss me." He did. This time there was no desperation, no looming threat inside the room, only months of trust turning into desire. Wyatt lifted her, and Clarissa laughed against his mouth as he carried her toward the bed. Later, beneath the heavy furs, she listened to his heartbeat. The bed no longer represented the price of one night's warmth. It was simply theirs. Outside, the mountain thawed. Inside, Clarissa finally understood that safety was not the absence of danger. It was knowing she would not face danger alone. Spring arrived violently. Snow collapsed into mud. Meltwater thundered through ravines. Pine needles and dark earth reappeared beneath the retreating white. Wyatt spent 3 days preparing the ridge. He dragged heavy logs across the main trail, forcing mounted riders to dismount. He placed traps along the eastern approach and marked each location for Clarissa so she would never accidentally step near them. Inside, she loaded cartridges. Neither pretended they could prevent Jallen Boon from coming. They could only decide what he would meet when he arrived. On the 4th morning, a jay screamed from the eastern pines. Wyatt froze. Clarissa looked up. "They're here." She reached for the shotgun. Wyatt moved to the firing slit near the door. A voice carried across the clearing. "Mercer." Clarissa recognized Jallen instantly. Even after months away, his voice had the power to tighten old muscles inside her body. Refined, controlled, almost pleasant. That had always been part of what made him dangerous. He sounded civilized while doing monstrous things. Wyatt looked through the gap. 6 men had entered the clearing. 5 regulators surrounded Jallen Boon. Boon stood among the mud and melting snow in an expensive coat, looking as though he had personally taken offense at the existence of the wilderness. "Clarissa," he called, "I know you're inside." She gripped the shotgun harder. Wyatt said quietly, "You don't have to answer." "I know," Boon continued. "You've made this far more difficult than necessary. Come out and we end it." Clarissa walked toward the wall. Wyatt caught her eye but did not stop her. She remained behind cover. "You mean you end it," she called. A pause. Then Boon laughed. "There she is." Clarissa hated that laugh. "You stole from me. I took money to escape you. You humiliated me. You survived." His voice sharpened. "You were supposed to be my wife." "No, Jallen. You decided that. I never did." Wyatt's gaze shifted briefly to Clarissa. The irony was not lost on either of them. Boon had demanded marriage and called it entitlement. Wyatt had offered a brutal bargain but accepted the answer could be no. Months later, Clarissa knew exactly which difference mattered. Boon called again. "Mercer, you believe keeping another man's property makes you honorable?" Wyatt's voice thundered through the door. "She isn't property. She took my silver." "Then complain about the silver." "She took my pride." "That sounds like your problem." Clarissa almost smiled. Boon stopped pretending to be amused. "Burn the cabin." The regulators raised their rifles. "Down," Wyatt shouted. The first volley struck like a storm made of iron. Bullets tore splinters from the logs. Dust filled the room. A round smashed through a shelf and sent tin cups spinning across the floor. Clarissa pressed herself behind the stone chimney. Wyatt waited. The rifles outside fired again. And again. Then came the pause while the men worked their actions and shifted position. Wyatt rose. One regulator was advancing with a lantern. Wyatt fired. The man dropped, and the lantern shattered harmlessly into mud. A metallic snap sounded from the trees. A scream followed. One of the flanking men had stepped into Wyatt's concealed trap. The remaining regulators hesitated. "Keep moving!" Boon shouted. His composure had begun to crack. Two men broke toward the rear of the cabin. Wyatt saw them. "They're going around." Clarissa knew what he intended before he touched the door bar. No. If they reach the rear window, they can fire inside from cover. It's a crossfire. Yes. Then we find another way. There isn't one. Wyatt started lifting the bar. Clarissa caught his arm. For one terrible second, they looked at each other. Neither had ever promised forever. Neither had spoken beautifully about love. But winter had created its own language. Coffee left warm. A repaired coat. A body moving closer after nightmares. A shelf rearranged and never moved back. A name spoken with respect. Clarissa released him. "Come back." Wyatt's face tightened. "That's the plan." "No, say it." He stared at her. Then he touched the side of her face. "I'll come back." He opened the door and dove onto the porch. Gunfire ripped across the clearing. Wyatt rolled behind stacked cordwood and returned fire. Clarissa dropped to her knees near the doorway, shotgun ready. Boon stood near the center of the clearing, shouting commands. One regulator moved behind a pine. Clarissa saw his rifle rise. He had Wyatt's back. Months earlier she had fired because panic left no time to think. This time she understood exactly what she was doing. She aimed, fired. The regulator collapsed. Pain punched through Clarissa's shoulder, though nothing like the first winter shot. The muzzle flash revealed her position. Jallen Boon turned. Their eyes met across the muddy clearing. For a moment, Clarissa was back in Oakhaven, back in his saloon, back beneath his hand, back listening while he explained what her future would be. Then she remembered the cabin behind her. The winter. Wyatt. Herself. Boon lifted his revolver toward her chest. Clarissa tried to raise the shotgun again. Too slow. A rifle cracked. Boon jerked sideways. His shot tore into the porch roof. He stared at his thigh as blood spread through the expensive fabric of his trousers. Wyatt stepped from behind the cordwood. His Winchester was trained directly on Boon. "I warned your men," Wyatt called. Boon collapsed to one knee. 3 regulators were down. Another thrashed in the trap. The last 2 looked at their employer, then at Wyatt. Whatever Jallen had promised them was no longer worth dying for. They ran. Boon shouted after them. Neither looked back. Wyatt crossed the clearing. Clarissa watched from the doorway. Boon tried to lift his revolver. Wyatt kicked it away. "You think this ends anything?" Boon snarled. Wyatt stood over him. "It ends you coming to my house." "You should kill me." "I could." Boon's expression flickered. Wyatt continued. "But Clarissa spent too much of her life believing men like you decide what happens next." He looked toward the cabin. Clarissa stepped onto the porch. Wyatt turned back to Boon. "So she decides." Boon looked at her. For the first time, Clarissa saw fear beneath his arrogance. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt small. She walked down the steps. Mud soaked her boots. Jallen had imagined this confrontation differently. He had expected the frightened woman he chased from Oakhaven. Someone exhausted enough to surrender. Someone who still measured herself by his power. That woman no longer existed. Clarissa stopped beside Wyatt. Boon's breathing came hard. "Clarissa." She felt nothing when he said her name. No obedience. No dread. Nothing. You hunted me across Montana because I told you no. You stole from me. I would steal it again. His face twisted. You think this animal made you strong? Clarissa looked at Wyatt, then back at Boon. No. Her voice was calm. He gave me somewhere safe enough to remember I already was. Boon glanced at Wyatt's rifle. What now? Clarissa considered him. Months earlier she might have dreamed about killing Jallen. She had imagined revenge during hungry nights and frightened mornings. But killing him while he knelt wounded in the mud would not erase what he had done. It would only bind one more part of her life to him. You crawl back to Oakhaven, she said. You tell everyone I left because I chose to leave. You tell them I was never yours. And you never come near this ridge again. Boon stared at her. And if I do? Clarissa glanced at Wyatt. You already know we shoot better than your men. Wyatt's mouth twitched. Boon looked between them and finally understood. This was not a captive woman hiding behind a stronger man. They were partners. That was what made them dangerous. Wyatt lowered the Winchester slightly. Start crawling. Humiliation burned through Jallen's face, but he crawled. They watched him drag himself toward the trail until the trees swallowed him. Only then did Wyatt turn toward Clarissa. For several seconds neither spoke. He looked over her face, her arms, her chest, checking for blood. I'm fine. He touched her shoulder anyway. You? Fine. She looked at a tear in his coat. You're bleeding. Scratch. You promised to come back. I did. Yes. Something broke in Wyatt's expression. Throughout the entire battle he had shown no fear. Now his hands shook. He pulled Clarissa against him. Not carefully. Not politely. Desperately. His face pressed into her hair. Clarissa wrapped both arms around his waist. You were afraid, she whispered. Wyatt said nothing. You were. I saw him aim at you. His voice was barely audible. Clarissa held him tighter. For months, Wyatt had been the fortress. Now, finally, he allowed himself to be human inside it. I'm here, she said. His breath left him slowly. Around them, the clearing was torn apart. Mud was churned by boots and bullets. The porch was splintered. One shutter hung crooked. Their cabin would need repairs before the next winter. Clarissa looked at it and felt no despair. They knew how to repair things. That afternoon, they cleaned what could be cleaned. They carried weapons inside. They patched holes temporarily. They dealt with the wounded man caught in the trap without cruelty, disarmed him, bound his leg, and sent him downhill after Boon once he could be moved. Wyatt did not kill men simply because he could. By sunset, the ridge had become quiet again. Clarissa sat on the porch wrapped in one of Wyatt's coats. Spring sunlight broke beneath the clouds and spread across the wet mountains. Wyatt lowered himself beside her. For a long time they watched water dripping from the roof. Finally, Clarissa said, I need to renegotiate our original agreement. Wyatt glanced at her. What agreement? The one involving your bed. His eyebrow lifted. You objecting 4 months late? I object to the wording. Of course you do. You said if I slept in your bed, I would wake up as your wife. You did. Clarissa turned toward him. I think you left something out. What? You never asked whether you would wake up as my husband. Wyatt became very still. Clarissa smiled. Do you? The mountain man, who had faced armed regulators without blinking, looked almost uncomfortable. Do I what? Choose me. Wyatt stared at her, as if the answer were so obvious that language insulted it. Then he understood why she needed to hear it. Not a bargain. Not responsibility. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Choice. Yes. Clarissa waited. Wyatt sighed. Yes, Clarissa. I choose you. For how long? His gray eyes narrowed. You planning to leave? No. Then stop asking foolish questions. She laughed. He caught the back of her neck and kissed her. This time the kiss was firm but unhurried, warmed by spring sunlight instead of desperation. When he pulled away, Clarissa rested her forehead against his. "I choose you too." The words settled between them, with more weight than the bargain ever had. Clarissa had reached the mountain half frozen, bruised, starving, and certain that every form of protection eventually became another cage. Wyatt had lived there, convinced solitude was safer than trusting anyone enough to lose them. Neither had been entirely wrong. The world outside their ridge remained dangerous. Jallen Boon had proven that. But survival had changed meaning. Clarissa was no longer a woman running through snow toward the first available fire. Wyatt was no longer a man guarding an empty cabin because walls could never betray him. They had built something neither of them had known how to ask for. Not ownership, not rescue. A partnership strong enough to survive a winter and bloody enough to defend itself when spring came. The damaged cabin stood behind them, scarred but solid. Clarissa looked toward the bed visible through the open doorway and remembered the first night, the freezing floor, the heavy furs, Wyatt's impossible condition. "If you sleep in my bed, you wake up as my wife." At the time she had accepted because she wanted to live until morning. Now she understood the deeper truth. The bed had never been what saved her. The mountain had not saved her. Even Wyatt had not saved her by himself. What saved Clarissa was finally reaching a place where her choices were honored long enough for her to reclaim them. She had fought beside him because she chose him. He had stood between her and Boon because he chose her. And when darkness came that evening, Clarissa did not sleep in Wyatt Mercer's bed because she owed him warmth, protection, shelter, or gratitude. She slept there because it was her bed too, her cabin, her mountain, her husband, her home.